Everywhere forever is in a way the opposite of what we are, which is here and now. It's like trying to look at a rainbow from all directions at once.
Now you've seen a few spaceships, some of the vehicles we send in the sky that was a very odd shapes, and the spherical one is a pretty good shape. And our own Earth is a spaceship. It's a spherical spaceship, only 8,000 miles in diameter. We're zooming through space around the sun 60,000 miles an hour.
As human beings, the only thing we can really do is move. Our foot moves a pedal, which moves a car. Our hand moves a throttle, which can move a boat. Our lungs move air. Our heart moves blood. The movement of electrical impulses in our brain create thought. And electrons move as wave and particles around the nucleus of an atom. I began thinking about the movement of small structures when we were getting kicked out of our studios in Fort Point, Boston. I really wanted to have control over my space, and currently being asked to move, I didn't. So I prefabricated a little studio within my studio in Boston and bought some land in upstate New York. My goal was to complete the structure before winter, but it didn't quite work out. Although I did learn a lot about building, what I did and didn't want to do, and ultimately what I wanted was to be able to move fluidly and easily, and using traditional heavy materials wasn't the answer. So I began thinking about how NASA uses high-tech materials and really maximizes the economy of it. Everything has a purpose. And what I did was create a spacesuit, kind of thinking about that as a shelter. And this is created with Tyvek envelopes from FedEx turned inside out and sewn together to create a waterproof shell, basically a structure for my body. Neil Armstrong trained in Iceland because it was the most like the moon on Earth. I first went to Iceland 5 years ago. Here I am doing some anti-gravity experiments. During an expedition to the north, I found this, which I think is a geothermal switching station used to release extra steam. But really what it does is combine this high-tech materials and lightweight, efficient use of structure that allows these things to really be placed anywhere and gives them a certain sense of mobility. So what I sort of started thinking about was how to use materials in the best possible way, which led me, being in Iceland, to wool. And so I felted a boot to begin with, then eventually a sleeping bag. So I began thinking how to merge these two worlds, the high-tech geodesic structures and the traditional yurt. So I came up with this design, which is based on tensegrity and allows it to be folded up and moved very easily. It's also very strong. I became very inspired by structures used by indigenous people and thinking about their culture and the type of religion that was common among many nomads around the world, which was shamanism. So I began to think, how does this play into our modern life? And what sort of new religion or practices and rituals would we make? So on my recent trip to Iceland, I created a small carbon fiber geodesic dome that was easily collapsible and movable, and experimented with different ways in which to move it and interact with it and just basically have fun. Because it was so lightweight, in a way it could act like clothing or an extension of the body. Here it's sort of acting like a tumbleweed. Materials are really important to me, and so this is a Tyvek that's got camouflage digital printing on it. And Tyvek is sort of like the closest thing to felted plastic. It's waterproof, lightweight, and breathable. This is a small Tefzel window, which is basically like a clear Teflon. It's used in the Eden Project, which is a huge dome in Cornwall, England, and in the Water Cube in Beijing. Revisiting wool, I thought to make a poncho, sort of like a personal shelter, but to use some of the same techniques that Mongolians use to make felt for their yurts.
Handanekin tatsadarısın halluğunu digin sarulutuga Cince narvin takhandırıtsın Cahın şargın iksiktin otar Sağan terine tallı ibo Verdin kişi bitini vaysıl Korugu varken koya Tiritek sugin tindildi dostigal İmi sayhın tallan ottiga Anetsin bitini etin ottiga Timilde sayhın tallan ottiga Erikitti mongolin darıhın otar Tammukta hotsa sukhi taha tatminukta tursi taha Marınga hormanı çigure endiligic Oyhın doğan seyhine hındarek Cancınga sukhi inire ervitsın Çargıl tevitini tammukta nuttiga Zallor namara çatağa ambarusın Zayya tevşin mongolin otar
Felt is typically made by agitating wet or damp animal hair. And that's what they were doing behind the horse. They were rolling it up and using the horse basically to agitate and make the fibers interlock tighter and tighter and tighter until you end up with a textile or fabric like felt. So I imagine instead of a horse to use a bike, which is much more common and much more accessible to our culture. But I do wonder what it is we might be missing, taking the spirit out of the machine, and what we would gain if we used a horse. No. Go over here. Come here. In this sculpture, I tried to make something feel, or at least look, alive. Here I attached a feather to a GoPro and threw it in the air. I'm interested in trying to incorporate smart materials, so I use photochromatic paint that changes color based on ultraviolet light. So when the sun shines, small little triangles on this dome turn magenta, like flowers coming out to bloom. The land. So a couple years ago, I purchased a piece of property outside of Tucson, and my friend and I split an acre, each spending $750. And it's a place that really is limited in what you can build. It's not, doesn't have water, doesn't have electricity, and it's sort of just an experimental zone to try out new building techniques. And here I'm preparing the soil to do some rammed earth experiments. And rammed earth is the technique of using slightly dampened soil and compacting it using a pneumatic tamper, or in this case, a hand tamper. After doing it for a while, it sort of dawned on me that it's the closest thing to felted dirt, felted soil. It's the same process of interlocking tiny little things to make a larger structural composite, I guess. Here we're assembling a 2-frequency geodesic dome made out of plywood and stitched together using wire, the same technique that they used to do stitch and glue boats. And then with a boat you would epoxy over it and fiberglass over it. But with this, I used elastomeric roofing paint and more building oriented materials that you can get at Home Depot, not like marine epoxies and things like that. So rammed earth has been around for thousands of years and was one of the first building techniques that people used and is still used. And then the geodesic dome is obviously a bit newer. So this is really the combination of the old and the new, and experimenting with combining those two things together. This is a time lapse taken from the sky space within the dome. I'm not really sure how many domes I've made, but I think why I keep making them is that they have an inherent genetic DNA to them. So it's sort of a meditation where you don't have to think too hard, you just follow instructions, repeat the same thing, and end up with a result. Although sometimes late at night, it's a little bit more tricky. Here's the process of making metal conduit domes. I really enjoy the manufacturing aspect to it, where you can sort of take one thing and just by changing its shape, make it function in a new and useful way. So this is just pressing the end of the pipe with a shot press. Then I drill a hole in it, and it allows it to be able to be connected together to form any number of shapes. Here I'm making an icosahedron. So another aspect to the idea of everywhere, or maybe more forever, is how technology can sort of enhance our perception of things and change what's possible. So I created this app that uses computer vision and recognizes an artwork, and using augmented reality, it superimposes this fictional world that you can move around and interact with as if it was in three-dimensional space. And what it actually is in a way a invisible video game that you get placed within once your phone recognizes the artwork. So it's programmed to recognize this artwork and animate this and put you within this fictional space in relationship to the artwork and how it perceives it through the phone. This shows how computers can drastically
Hello.
distort reality.
How are you doing? Good? I know! Oh, really? Really? Oh, that is just so special. Uh-huh. No. No. Seriously. Oh my god. Yeah. Whoa. Really? No way. No way. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Really? Wow. Oh, that is special. What? What's going on? What's happening?
A professor of mine in college told us that we were either the last generation to die or the first generation to live forever. And I think that would mean uploading our consciousness to a computer. Scientists have calculated that trees create more net output than input. So that means that they're getting some information or some resources from perhaps another dimension, a quantum realm that we're not aware of. We are born, live for a period of time as individuals, and then die. Bear Island, located in East Penobscot Bay, was purchased in 1904 by Caroline Matilda Wolcott Andrews to be the summer gathering place for her children and grandchildren. Among her children was R. Buckminster Fuller, the comprehensive, anticipatory design scientist. I've been the caretaker of Bear Island for 3 years and have drawn much inspiration from its people, its nature, and its history.
Now get that seaweed is kind of most extraordinary structuring. Very, very strong in tension, and we have these beautiful little pneumatic bulbs to make it float just exactly at the right depth in the ocean, and to just exactly the right depth for her to prosper and do whatever it has to do. I get down to the details of this, looking at it like our friend's plastic and all those little mass attraction, the curls that go on there. Nature's formulations are just, to me, absolutely unbelievably magnificent.
Bear Island has no running water. We haul buckets from the well or collect it from rain. Our electricity comes from the sun. Being forced to slow down really helps to enjoy and soak in all this nature, its patterns, and its beauty. Floating in the middle of the bay, sometimes I feel like an astronaut. At times, I feel like I can see the curvature of the Earth. And when it's really dark and the stars are out, I can feel the planet moving. Bear Island has changed my perception, my perspective. I can see how Bucky must have felt looking at these same trees, same rocks, same stars, skipping the same stones. I see Bear Island as a laboratory in which these two worlds can collide. A place to experiment and think about the old and the new and how they can help and further each other. Last summer, Caroline Matilda Wolcott Andrews' great-great-great-grandson, Pablo Marvel, brought a drone out to Bear Island. The battery is charged with solar power. He recorded this and many other videos. To me, it shows how you can do more with less. In the past, you would have needed an entire crew and a helicopter to achieve this sort of footage. Now, it's just me and him with a little sunshine in a boat. This summer, I received a grant from the Kindling Fund to build a floating geodesic sculpture. Like a tiny spaceship floating in the ocean, it will combine traditional techniques with new technologies in an attempt to imagine a world where we could live everywhere forever.